We just
So
make
I
sure.
wanted to welcome everybody to this Zoom meeting of the Chemical Consultants Network. The Chemical Consultants Network is a topical group of the American Chemical Society Philadelphia section. I'm Keith Wing, the current chair of CCN. We, as a group, is it our remit and our mission to try to help everybody that wants to either create and launch or maintain and foster a consulting career related to the chemical sciences, to do that as well as possible. But I would add that we do not only take technical people into our ranks. We have managers, we have executives, we have salespeople, we have computational chemists, quite a broad range of disciplines and people who have engaged in the chemical enterprise in one way or the other. And for a very modest fee, you can join our ranks and get the benefit of learning how to run and maintain your and make your chemical consulting business prosper. Today, we're very honored to have Mr. Sam Waltz, who we in CCN know most closely as leading CCN, which is a global chemical consulting technical network, as our speaker today. And we're honored to have Dr. Greg Wells provide some introduction for Mr. Waltz. Greg is a member of our steering committee and is a very experienced veteran of the pharmaceutical industry. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Wells. Greg?
Thanks, Keith. Happy to be here, and I'm happy to introduce Sam tonight to everybody. Sam, I worked with since, excuse me, since April of 2019 when he came on the scene to rescue CCN sort of from the ash heap and took it over from Beck Engineering, who was our previous owner. And he comes to us as a veteran coming out of the Midwest, graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and with bachelor's degrees in 71 and a master's degree in 73. And he's embarked on a professional career with DuPont in the area of public affairs, public policy, issues management, and business. Took an early out from DuPont back in the early 90s and formed his own company, Sam Waltz, the Strategic Capital Business Council, and has been involved since then in areas involving business advisory, planning, strategic capital services. And Sam has been helping us grow the company into an enlarged entity, and hopefully we will continue to prosper and succeed under Sam's leadership. And I'm glad to turn the microphone over to Sam, and he's going to talk to us tonight about funding your post-corporate career with technical expert consulting. So Sam, I leave it to you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Greg, thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Keith, thank you. Joanne, thank you for your fine support and leadership in this. I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to come back in a slide or two and just indicate a bit more of my background. But really what our goal is this evening is to overview some of the key issues, strategies for what we've called the development of a post-corporate career as a subject matter expert in technical consulting. I'm going to go into half a dozen areas. I'm really challenged in where to aim this. Do I aim this for years? We may find a little basic to answer questions, but I want to talk branding.
Your post-corporate career.
Okay, so we've talked about that. And by the way, let me apologize. You'd think we're living as close as we do here to Joe Biden that Comcast would have better service in this neighborhood. But regrettably, to use a technical word that engineers will recognize, technically it sucks. But anyway, I apologize. So let's go on. I talked a little bit about slide 2, Greg, overview key issues. Slide 3, the 6 areas for discussion: organization support, branding, marketing, consultant models, pricing. Just a real quick snapshot on my background. Grew up in the Midwest on a family farm in Illinois. Degrees from the University of Illinois, Vietnam era veteran, Army counterintelligence,
Right.
doctoral work, political journalist.
Sam.
Yeah.
Tell Greg what slide you want him to be on.
Slide number 4, Greg.
Okay, just say next slide when you're ready to move on.
Okay, are you on 4 now?
Funding your course, yes, about the speaker.
Yeah, that's good. All right, and I'll tell you next slide in a moment. My DuPont career, so Keith talked about the business people who are part of the network. I joined us a year ago, but my background is the business side, but I've always worked in technical environments. A consulting career based on that, where we do a lot of that kind of work, business advisory, M&A cap.
Sam, hold on for just a moment. Greg, we're seeing slide number 1. What are you slides?
I'm on the slide about the speaker.
Well, that's not what I'm seeing.
I'm seeing slide 1 too.
That doesn't make sense. Okay.
Yeah, same here. I'm seeing the
We're seeing slide 1. I'm on slide 1 now, but are we going through the slides?
it looks like maybe you're sharing a different window. You're sharing the edit version of the because I can see, the
There you go.
there we go. Got
Now
it.
we see slide 3.
Okay. Well, I might not be able to share the whole screen. Maybe that's my problem. Let me minimize this. Okay. We're at areas of
slide mode. You're sharing it in edit mode. You have to go to the slideshow mode.
Thought I had that up. Sorry, folks. Why is it not coming up?
All right, now
Now I see 4.
yeah, now you're switching appropriately, Greg.
So we want to be in slideshow, correct?
Yep.
Peter was right. There is an icon that clicks on "Give me the slideshow."
Okay. Thought I had that. I'm on the slide now for about the speakers. Is everybody there?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm here. So you see what I just said, and the last couple items are about CCN, and then we're actually kind of adding a new company in called Expert Nation, and I can talk more about that. Let me move on into the heart of the presentation. Next slide, Greg.
Where are we at here? Business organization?
5.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody there? Keith, are you
So
there?
really what I wanted to do is just kind of walk through some of the basics, and then we're going to escalate it to some of the marketing and channels to the market. So anybody who does this kind of thing should go ahead and incorporate themselves. Lawyers can counsel you. I am not a lawyer. I'm not providing legal counsel, but most consultants just simply get an LLC. Delaware is a very user-friendly state for LLCs. It's a couple $100, I think. and actually many of us will have 2 or 3 LLCs. The thing that is important in consulting is you also, and by the way, obviously, incorporation is there to protect your assets, your personal assets, from any landmines you might step on in business. It doesn't happen often, but but because it happens, you want to, basically manage that risk. Second thing is insurance, and you do want to think about professional services liability. Some insurance agents know that area well, some don't. You want to explore that. Some of them will sell you as though they're selling a property and casualty. So, your computer, your conference table, you want to focus on professional services liability. The tools of your trade for most people, unless you're running a lab, are not that great. You also want to have some business agreement templates, proposals, contracts, NDAs, and you can find those on the web. You can also work with an attorney, or that's an area where, frankly, most early stage businesses are DIY. You also want to be able to, and I'll talk more about this in a moment, define your business offering. What is it you're selling? And then obviously for, business cards, and among the people we work with, those are continuing to be important. Greg, next slide.
Sam,
Yes,
question, are you taking questions now or later? I mean,
whatever you'd like. Go right ahead.
On the insurance situation, I ran into a problem at one point where $1 million insurance was pretty easy to get, but then a lot of the refineries started going to 5 million, and that was very difficult, or exceedingly expensive. Do you have any suggestions as far as the amount here?
What's really important for many consultants, some clients, particularly bigger companies, will ask if you're insured. They get less hung up on what the level of insurance is and just making sure that you have it. So I think for most consultants, you're buying it as kind of a way to get
Very happy, always welcome.
legal help. And so I think $1 million is going to be fine for most people.
Thank you.
All right, Greg, next slide, business support.
Okay, we're there now. Everybody
Okay.
there?
And in this, in setting up your business, you're still actually focusing on yourself. And it's always interesting to me that we don't use LinkedIn as well as we could or we should. And I really encourage people to do a robust LinkedIn profile, not just a resume. Too many people treat it as a resume. It's much more than a resume. It's why people want to do business with you. More and more people, the first thing they do in due diligence is go to the LinkedIn profile and read about the person. Beyond that, and I can spend more time on that in Q&A, business marketing plan. Many senior level types who are in a group like this have read Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen Covey's second habit is begin with the end in mind. So what do you want to make this look like? Some people may just want to, fund their summer vacation. Some people may want to go ahead and build a second career. I think all of us are seeing more and more senior level consultants in the 50 to even 75 and 80-year-old age range. I recently put a project involving lead residue in soils from porcelain and ceramics glazing 100 years ago with a consultant who's 86 years old who wrote the book on that kind of work. And he was a great fit to go ahead and meet the needs. I'm seeing consultants who are 70 and 75 who are fully deployed. I'm seeing consultants in their 80s who continue to be quite active. And I think it really becomes a question of where does this fit in your life? What's your aspiration? I'm 73. I'm still full speed ahead. Greg would tell you I'm still working 50, 60 hours a week. I have a friend here in Delaware who's a retired Chief Justice of our Delaware Supreme Court. He's 87, still full speed ahead. His name is Norman Vesey, and I always kid Norman, you're my role model. I want to be like you when I grow up. So, my point is that this is an area where you can do it as little or as much as you want, well into the ages where many people in the last generation would have said, no, 65, I'm out, I quit. So it's up to what somebody wants to do. But what's important in doing that is to plan your work and work your plan, an old phrase we used to use regularly at DuPont. And if you start to look for ways to go about that, Michael Gerber, 30 years ago, wrote a great book to help entrepreneurs called The E-Myth Revisited. I had a copy of that here to hold up when I was doing live. Depending on what you're doing, if you're doing a project or two a year, you may not want bookkeeping or whatever. But if you're getting into doing much of it, you're going to spend. You ought to get some help if that's not your strong suit. That's where people get themselves into trouble. I've seen it happen, and you can expect to pay $25, $40 an hour. Some people might be up to 50. And QuickBooks.com, they're going to use that. We always encourage Microsoft 365. Get a good professional setup. Cell phone is sufficient. Dedicated laptop, dedicated home office. Greg, let's go ahead. I'm rushing a bit, but let's go ahead and move to the next slide.
Okay, I'm on branding, marketing, and business development. Everybody there?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm surprised sometimes by the number of people who will go ahead and just set up an email like Harvey Schmidlap at Gmail, and they don't have a website, they don't do anything, and they basically, in the view of many, I think, clients, are sending a message that they're just not that serious about building a consulting business. I always count, first of all, it's not hard to buy a URL, 10, 15, 20 bucks. There are thousands of places that sell those. And years ago, people used to come up with creative names, XYZ Consulting or this or that. Keep it simple. Focus it either on maybe your name. SamWaltz.com I set up in 1993 when I started my business. The CCN name that I use here as a reference point was set up by the first generation of founders of CCN, the engineers and scientists who left DuPont, who wanted to continue to do consulting. And CCN really back then took its name from Chemical Engineering Consulting. Today, most people we interact with have no idea what the name stands for, where it came from, and it really is not relevant. So you're looking to communicate meaning in a brand if you can. A brand can help communicate meaning, and as we start to go to a group brand, we've created the name expert-nation.com. And, that's a name you're going to start to see in some URLs. Greg's email will move to that. My email will move to that in another month or so as we get that set up. To get a professional website done, some people DIY it, do it yourself. Some people let their kids do it. You can get them for $1,000, for $2,500. For you shouldn't have to spend much, $5,000, but they can run up to that. It depends on how much you want into it. But you can get a really basic website for $1,200, $1,500, and that's going to be adequate for many people. One of the things that I encourage people to think about in terms of what they want to sell is a positioning statement that is both descriptive and aspirational. When I started SamWaltz.com, we use strategic capital and business counsel. So that tells an audience that we're working in the areas of business strategy, capital, and helping people, as we say in the positioning line that follows that, helping leaders and organizations navigate difficult events, trends, times, people, and issues to achieve their goals. And that's the positioning statement that we've used here 27 years. And it stands up today as well as it did back then. With CCN, we used Engineering, Science, and Technical Network. For the Expert Nation, we'll use Global Expert Network. The other thing I want to encourage you to think about is having really a professional email. You know, those are two that we use. You know, no pop at. You know, I mean, that's a great email. It's a great email to use for your family. But if you're selling your time for hundreds of dollars an hour, skip the pop at. When kids are in school, they'll often go ahead and come up with emails. I once brought in an intern out of the University of Delaware, delightful and talented young woman, and her email address coming in was polishblondie at, I don't know, Gmail or whatever it was. And the first thing, even though she had a company email, first thing I counseled her, she moved through her career and her profession, that was 20 years ago, was moved to a more professional email. Same thing with signature block, same thing with building a well-developed contact management system. As you go, be sure and archive in a CRM system all of your contacts, anybody you talk to. Make sure you're connected on LinkedIn, make sure you're connected, make sure you build them into the people section of Microsoft 365 if that's what you're using. The last thought is really kind of a positioning thought and a book that I often recommend for people getting involved in this kind of thing. Great book, came out about 20 years ago, I guess, Seth Godin's book, Tribes, We Need You to Lead Us. And it really focuses on thought leadership and creating, in effect, your own personal digital community that you're branded to. But it really helps you understand how each one of us as senior level professionals can begin to make ourselves experts in the areas that we work in and that we serve. Greg, next slide.
There you go, consultant models.
Yep. Okay. So what I've done here is kind of outline some things to think about. Most people will default when they start out to a straight hourly fee, and that's fine. Depending on the area you're in, many clients are less interested in an hourly fee and more interested in what they're going to pay and what they're going to get for it. Some areas of consulting lend themselves to a deliverables-based approach. Others just do not. So some people are going to be forever sentenced to sell their time by the hour, and then others will find a way where they're selling value. I'm selling this project, and the cost of this project is X. The interesting thing in our world, where Greg and I work, in the CCN world, we've sold basically by the hour. The company business model is an arbitrage business model, and we basically buy and sell hours. In the consulting business I've run for almost 30 years, we basically have, as often as we can, use the project deliverable. One of the things to think about that I always encourage people to think about as they get into this is to recognize that whichever organization you're going to be working with, you'll run into sticker shock. It could be a large corporation or whatever. So one of the things that I've encouraged is to think about what basic looks like. And I use a good, better, best model where you think about a basic offering and a comprehensive offering. You don't want to, on one hand, be kind of putting together a proposal where the client has a comprehensive deliverable in mind and a comprehensive budget, and you offer them a basic product. On the other hand, you don't want to be in a situation, if you like doing the work and you've got the time, where you want to give them a comprehensive proposal and a comprehensive budget, and they're operating on a basic budget, or the beer budget kind of thing. You also really want to think about how you build your contract for hours, functions, deliverables. One or two other things that will come up for somebody coming in, particularly if you're working with entrepreneurs. And I've seen this for years with entrepreneurs. Some entrepreneurs really want to trade equity for effort. And so what that's doing is putting the risk on you. You've got an opportunity cost. You're spending your opportunity cost with them. You really would rather be earning money for the family or the grandkids or vacation or the summer house or whatever, and instead you're earning a share in somebody's company. I've got a guy I know whose background was more DuPont manufacturing. He's downstate Delaware. He's got 3 years into a company working with it in poultry waste management and moving that both into feed and into energy. And I think, as I said, 3 years, and the next check he gets, I think, will be his first. And so much of what he's fallen into the trap, he got into the consulting thing almost by accident, and he's now there where he's in a very, very awkward, difficult situation, and it's very difficult for him to change the structure of what he's in. And frankly, I see people who have ended up because of this kind of thing, where they thought they had the support of their spouse or their spouse's family going into this kind of thing, and they end up jeopardizing their family relationships, jeopardizing maybe even their marriage, because they've not been smart about how they have proceeded in this. And I'd like to say that's rare, but I'm not sure it is rare. I think it happens. This is the kind of thing that really comes with experience. I don't know that there's a book on that. Greg, let's go to the next slide.
Okay, 5, pricing.
Okay, hang on. Okay, pricing. I'm going to do something here because this is a senior level group that I don't ordinarily do, and I just went ahead to take a shot at pricing. Probably everybody could find a basis to argue with me on this. This is using what we used to call at DuPont the swag method, and I suspect all of this audience knows what the swag method is, but it really is intuitive based on what I've observed. Obviously, the variables in pricing on consulting, some fields are higher, regulatory is higher, pharma, even expert witness tends to be one of the higher ones, but it's a very rigorous niche to get in. It also really is a key variable, depends on your personal brand as a professional, and particularly your relationships. Ideally, people who are planning at, say, 65 or 70 to go into consulting have spent the last 5 or 10 years of their careers planning for it, getting ready for it, taking care of the right kind of people in the professional groups and organizations, with customers and all of that, where they have created an open door for themselves. If I were coaching an entrepreneur, and I do a lot of entrepreneurial coaching on this and help people with this, I'd love to have that person who's got 3 years before they want to go out and set it up. And we're going to have them set up so that by the time they do that, they're going to be working from a real position of strength. I sometimes think about this based by observation. This is not surveyed or sampled, observation, by kind of a bell curve. And if I wanted a bell curve that bracketed 90% of it, I'd say between 100 and 450 an hour. If I took that bell curve and I said, where do I find the peak of it with 50% of the volume, I'd say between 150 and 2.25. If I looked at that bell curve, I'd look at the upslope and say you have a very, very quick climb up to about 150 an hour for senior level people, but you've got a very gradual downslope, meaning on the backside of it, that remaining 40 or 45% are going to, you know, gradually come down from the other side of the bell curve at 225 to 350, 450, really depending on where their specialty is. It is not unusual, particularly for people with technical competencies, to have a market value an expert witness work at 400 to 500, and occasionally, depending on the value of the case, you will see it go higher than that. I would just ask you not to, you know, don't quote me on this. This is my own observation and swag method. I wanted to bring something of real value, and I thought perhaps providing, part of my military background was intelligence, so perhaps providing some of this market intel is a useful help. Greg, next slide.
Okay, number 6, channels to the market models.
Yep. So the default path for most people coming into this really is a solo practice or solopreneur, and that's where you're the chief cook and bottle washer. You're doing everything yourself. And for most people, that kind of meets their model. Some people do the solo, and by the way, the key word I use on that is not business. It's self-employment. And we too often confuse business and self-employment. A definition that I'll share with you as I look at that is that a business is an organization, a business entity that has the power to live on beyond the founder, beyond the person. Self-employment basically says you're feeding yourself this week, this month, this year, and when you stop going to work, the income stops. So number one really is the solo practice, solopreneur. Number two, the solo with IRS or 1099s or employees is starting to build a small business. Let me just take a moment and talk about that. When I left DuPont, I was in my 40s. It was 1993, and I started as a solo, but I very quickly added 1099s, and really within about 15, 18 months, I had about 15, I'll say 1099 colleagues. They were not full-time, but there was enough work growing that it got me to a point where within about 18 months, I moved to the beginning of a staff model. I hired my first 2 employees well under 2 years into it, about 18, 20 months. Within a few years, I grew to about 10 employees, a staff of 10 of us. And I ran it that way for many years until I got the last of my kids through college. And I enjoyed it, but it was more about nurturing the team. I've always enjoyed that, but it was less about me doing the work myself. And so between 06, 07, in that time frame, and 2010, I really desired to get back to the solo practice. At 10 people, for those people who think about building a business and selling it, I did not regard it as being large enough to have any real value to sell. And I could have tried to sell it, but instead I just decided to gradually scale it back between 07 and 10 till I got back to a solo practice. And those are the kind of questions you really wrestle with on that. You can also do an affiliation with other groups that do shared overhead and expense. I think there are some of those around. I think there may even be a couple of members of this organization who use that kind of an approach. Another one that I put in here, and I'm familiar with it in the external affairs industry, are what I call subscriptions to a lead generation affiliation. It's somebody who buys a great website, they go ahead and they basically get people to pay them to be listed as suppliers. So what they're doing is hoping to have that discovered, and then the risk capital. The revenue model from that is financed by the consultant. The other one is kind of a qualified membership in a network group. That's kind of like the CCN model, but there's probably another 10 or 12 companies that do that. Some are doing it in very, very niche vertical specialties like pharma regulatory or polymers consulting or whatever. And in those, the capital risk is on the company. We take that capital risk, as Greg would tell you, at CCN and soon to be with the new entity, Expert Nation. But then what that means is that we're delivering value, we're bringing business to a consultant that the consultant would not have otherwise had. The consultant is taking a little bit of a discount off her or his desired list rate for the value we bring in terms of clients, scope of work, contracts, all of that. And then knowing that we need to be able to cover our overhead and maybe make a nickel profit by being able to mark up that to the consultant. So those are some of the various kinds of models or ways to think about it. The first one, the solo practice, being where all the marketing is really on the individual. The person has to get up and invent their business every day. The lead generation is there. I've never really seen those provide the kind of value that they wanted to. And then, you know, there are a number of people who kind of work in informal or formal groups. And then the last one, Greg, let's go on to the next slide. And we're real close to wrapping up here.
Q&A.
Okay. Let me just a second. I've got to get myself down here. Okay, that does wrap it up. So let me say this, and then Joanne, we can go, or Keith, we can go to questions. Number one, anyone who's on here, I'd encourage you, please just reach out, find me on LinkedIn, ask to connect. Number two, if you want a copy of the slides, you know, feel free to reach out to me by the email you see there, or feel free to call if there's anything urgent. If there's anything you want to talk about, happy to do that. Greg and I are around. Greg and I, as Greg said, he and I began to work together about 20 months ago when I bought CCN, but I'd been affiliated with CCN before that, going back almost a decade. I'd served on the company's board of directors as the really kind of a strategic business advisor, as the original founders of the company had really, I'll say, begun to age out, move on to other things. So, Keith and Joanne, Greg, I think that pretty well, I've raced through it. I still feel awful about the technology issue coming in, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions. I did try to add some value to everyone depending on where they are in their experience curve. But with that, let me go ahead and pause. Thank you.
Well, actually, Sam, I think that your comments based on being an experienced consultant were really valuable. And I'd like to open the floor to questions. You can pose them in chat, or perhaps maybe there's few enough of us now. Maybe you could just pose it on the Zoom audio. So any questions for Sam?
Hey, Sam, are you going to continue with the CCN name, or are you dropping it out?
Oh, no, the CCN name has so much value. Who was asking the question?
This is Bill Golton. You know me.
Oh, good to catch up with you, Bill. Absolutely. The CCN name, for many of us, is just shy of being tattooed on our body. So the CCN name is going to be around long after you and long after me. We have no plan. What it is, Bill, is just to get to it real quick. And for the group, because there will be some people in the group who are more business side than they are technical side. What CCN really had represented was the peak of excellence and thought leadership in science, engineering, and technical consulting. CCN never had really been positioned in terms of business consulting, strategy, public affairs, marketing. And yet, Bill, as you know, that's been the heart of my practice and the samwaltz.com practice for almost 30 years, and it's the kind of work I've done for more than 40. So what I've done, what we've done, Greg and others, we have built out a common platform that will serve both areas, both the technical consulting done on the arbitrage model that we've used, as well as standard business consulting. And in setting up that model and the platform, we've set that up not under the old CCN name, because under the terms that we had acquired the company, but we've created the new entity. I've invested to create that, and we're using that name, which is the expert-nation.com. But underneath the expertnation.com will be a half a dozen key entities. That CCN.com will be one, but there's samwaltz.com and 2 or 3 others that will basically expand the breadth of that offering. Bill, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. I thought you were substituting Expert Nations for CCN. Now I understand.
No,
that.
not at all. The CCN name, and Bill, you remember that actually one of the 6 or 8 founders, and I'd love to catch up with you, because I need to hear more of that history. But one of the early founders of CCN was my wife Sandy's uncle, Lee Thomas.
Right.
And Lee, I know, treated CCN and he's been passed now 6, 7, 8 years. But when Lee was alive, CCN for him was like another child. That's how I really learned of CCN more. Not only him, but through Boyd Sorensen and so on. And so I never would do away with the CCN name. But we've got to find some smart ways to move beyond it in order to build the breadth and depth of business opportunity that can help support and carry the cost of being in business, of overhead.
Good. It sounds good. How's business?
Well, business, thanks to the pandemic, as the pandemic's hurt us like it has everyone. So at CCN, where business really had been kind of mature for, I'm going to say, long before I bought it, a number of years, it had been stayed pretty stable. It really, with the pandemic this year, began to fall by close to half. Now, that's over the last 6 months. I'm seeing it really begin to pick up now. We are fielding inbound calls every day, some in the U.S. I had one the other day on hydrogen, energy. Have several, lots happening in the CBD and hemp space. I mentioned the project on, in effect, fingerprinting lead residue in soils to match with porcelain and ceramic glazing industry. We've desalinization projects. They just run the gamut, and it's just so interesting.
Okay. I have a question from Ravi Chandra Palaparthi. His comment is, excellent talk, thanks. A question for the speaker, please. Would you please comment on the need and value of getting a PE certification for providing technical consultancy spanning the material science and chemical engineering areas?
Yeah. To me, the answer to that is really kind of what I said earlier, kidding my friend Norman Vesey, the retired Chief Justice. What do you want to do when you grow up? 30, 40 years ago, I would have loved to play professional baseball, but I was never quite good enough to even play first base, where I don't have to run or throw very much. There are lots of things that we have the opportunity to define in our lives. I think becoming a PE is one of those great credentials. I've been fortunate, been blessed to work with PEs throughout my career. I'm a huge fan of the credential. The real question is, how do you want to build your consulting practice? And as we used to sometimes evaluate things like that, is the view worth the climb? So how rigorous is it to get it? I think a PE credential always can help you, and I think it can open the doors to projects that you might not get otherwise. On the other hand, I think people don't need the PE to build a robust consulting career. In my industry, in the external affairs industry, I've got two credentials. One, the APR that several thousand people nationally and internationally have, and one, the fellow credential, of which there may be, I'll say, 500 or 600 worldwide total ever got it, and perhaps 150 or 200 of us still working who have it. They're great credentials to have. I present the credential as a part of why it's smart to hire me or hire us, but I don't know that that either one has ever been the tiebreaker in hiring. So I think the PE for many people is not only a professional credential, but a personal achievement. And I think it deserves to be respected in both. But if anyone is inclined to do it, it's certainly the kind of endeavor I would applaud.
Sam?
Yeah.
How would you characterize your changes from that you see now in CCON from when Beck had it? And I worked for Beck.
So how do I characterize my changes? What?
From when Beck had it to what you're doing now. What have you changed?
Well, I describe CCON in three generations. The founding of CCON was 1985. And by the way, who's this from Beck? Is this one of the engineers on the team or whatever?
Yeah, I'm
Our
Pardon?
fault.
HOLT.
Okay, got it. So I described CCON 1 that Bill Golton referred to as running from 1985 to 2014, and I was involved on behalf of the board of directors in selling CCON to Beck when CCON, the founding generation, let it go, and that was by January 1, 2015. Beck had acquired it. Beck completely integrated it into CCON, it completely integrated CCON into Beck Engineering. And Beck Engineering, for those who on the call in the meeting who don't know, is a very, very well-regarded, significantly run, still founder-owned and run engineering firm in Liberty Corners, New Jersey, North Jersey. It's a nationally known firm in the Mid-Atlantic region. And Chuck Beck and Chuck's family and his colleagues do a wonderful job. My impression is that when Beck Engineering bought CCON, they really were thinking about doing something else with it. They never really changed it very much. So the CCON that they decided to exit in January of 2019 was substantially the same company that they had acquired. They had integrated it in. It was inside the Beck P&L and all that kind of thing, and it was providing project engineering. That CCON that Beck had acquired from the founders, which in turn has sold me. And by the way, in both instances, for the people who know what this means, it was an asset sale, not an entity sale. So in an asset sale, what I bought was the technology platform that its vendor was using. I bought the 1,500 or so consultants that were part of the database, and kind of the brand, the name of the company and the history. So those were the assets. To kind of speak to that, all of that still continues to go forward. It'll continue to go forward unchanged. I have a lot of confidence in that. What I had to face after I bought it was, okay, how do I integrate what I've been doing on the business consulting side, which was not something that CCON had been doing either before BECT or during BECT, business planning and the other kinds of public affairs and the other kinds of things that I've been doing. And I could have put those in under the CCON brand. I thought about that, but I finally opted not to. So basically what's going to happen is, to kind of back to Bill Golden's question, the CCON that was running under BECT, which had been integrated, will continue to run really as a separate entity under the new Expert Nation brand, and there will be other units that kind of reflect the kind of business consulting work I've been involved in for 30 years, 40 if you include, my DuPont time, that will be other units alongside CCON. And the fundamental thing is that they will share the same platform. I've invested to create a platform for project management, for accounting, bookkeeping, and all of that I've invested through my samwaltz.com business. And that's what we're kind of branding to the Expert Nation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, okay. We're getting a little bit short on time, Sam, but I did have another question from Dr. Peter Bernstein. He's asking, he's a little bit curious why you did not mention the ACS, American Chemical Society, Professional Liability Insurance Program. It is designed for people like us chemical professionals. It's easy to deal with. And he wonders what you think about it. Sometimes one might have issues with dealing with brokers who don't understand chemical professionals' needs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, let me say,
help start that.
Yeah, Peter, I really appreciate you mentioning that. I was unfamiliar with that. And the fact that you brought it up proactively, you got my email. I'd love to hear more about it. So if you can drop me an email. I am a huge fan of professional societies and the benefits that they bring. I suspect that that's a benefit that's available to ACS members, but not to people who don't qualify for ACS membership. So I don't qualify, as far as I know, for ACS membership, even though I worked many years for DuPont at pretty senior. I don't think I do. Maybe I do. But Peter, to your question, I am in my professional society for the external affairs industry. I'm a past elected global national president of the group, which would be like, you as an ACS member being national president of ACS. So I'm familiar with professional societies. I value them. I don't think we have one in my group, which really brings up a great idea to be thinking about that when we get out from under the pandemic, that I'll talk to society leadership about, because more and more people go down that path of self-employment. So, Peter, thank you for mentioning that. And I was remiss in not mentioning it, but only because I didn't know about it.
Yeah, Sam, actually, the Chemical Consultants Network started it up, restarted it, I should say, and in the early days, and it continues, and it's mainly for consultants, and it's both ACS and AICHE are combined with it.
Okay, I'm really pleased, and as Greg Wells will tell you, whenever I run across something like this, I want to get a PhD in it. I want to learn as much about it as I can. So I was not familiar with that, but I really am grateful you mentioned it.
I believe it requires membership, this is Peter Bernstein, in one of the two societies, but you don't need a PhD to be a member.
No, that's right.
Okay.
So almost anyone can be a member. They have to just apply. Depending on your age, you could qualify for a senior membership based on what you were describing. Yeah.
Well, Peter, I found that I've reached a point where I qualify for a senior membership almost any place I go. So, but I appreciate you mentioning that. I will look at that, and I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm very familiar with I'm somewhat familiar with ACS, and I have a lot of respect for it. And in my work at DuPont, I worked with at least 2 people who went on to be CEOs of DuPont, where I handled public affairs, government relations, speech writing for them, that kind of stuff. So I had occasions where I worked in passing alongside the ACS, but I've never really kind of been inside the ACS. So thank you, Peter.
Yeah, Sam, you would definitely qualify, but you do have to pay the dues, of course.
That's all right. I pay the dues regularly.
Right.
Actually, I don't anymore.
All right.
Okay.
So, are there further questions for Sam? Well, if not, I would like to thank Sam and Greg for putting on this presentation. I know there was a few technical challenges at the beginning, but I think Sam got his message across. You can see the modes by which Sam can be reached. And with that, I would like to thank these 2 gentlemen for speaking with us. And I'd like to thank the entire audience for participating in the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, and
Thank
thanks everybody for your patience. And I know a lot of members in CCN are also within our CCN network, and we welcome anyone else who isn't to on board, and we'd be glad to take care of you. I
Okay.
think we may be losing someone.
Very good.
All right. Thank you. I think we'll close the meeting now.
All right,
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good night.